Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Daily Bolt with your host, Dr. Jeff Tilley. Today's topics, and yes, topics, plural, more on Isaias, the tropical storm, and Perserverance blasts off. Sit back and relax and enjoy today's Daily Bolt. So we have two topics on today's podcast, and I could have actually tried to fit in more. This has been a very busy science day with lots of science news being put out there today. So some of it's going to wait for tomorrow because Tropical Storm Isaias is now forecast to make a very close approach to the U.S. East Coast because it has strengthened and actually became a tropical storm as predicted overnight last night. We're going to spend a little time on it, but we're also going to talk about and start with the fact that the new mission to Mars blasted off from Cape Canaveral this morning. This mission is called Perserverance. And it's an interesting mission because it has some different objectives than previous missions to Mars have been. Part of the mission of this particular spacecraft is to do some tests of technology on Mars to see whether or not in future missions we could actually use these technologies to explore more of the planet's surface and get more bang for the buck out of a given mission to Mars because they're not cheap. The technology development isn't cheap. The rockets aren't cheap. You've got to have a spacecraft that can make it all the way to Mars. So one of the things that they're going to be testing out is what's called the Ingenuity Mars helicopter. And the idea here is to make a number of test flights around the surface of Mars to see whether or not it can be not only easily controlled remotely, but whether or not it's an effective way to explore the planet. In addition to a rover, and it's the most sophisticated planetary rover that's ever been developed. That's one of the main pieces of equipment that's going on this particular mission. And that is actually what gives the mission its name of Perseverance. But this particular mission will also be examining geology in terms of the vicinity of the crater that it's planning to land in. And specifically, it's called Jezero Crater. I haven't looked at a map of Mars, so I don't know exactly what part of the planet it's at. But the other part of the mission is what we call astrobiology. And the big mission of the rover, besides doing more exploration of geology, the rocks, and whether or not they indicate the previous presence of water, is to try and see if there was previous presence of life, specifically microscopic life on Mars. And if there is evidence of previous microscopic life on Mars, this is a huge deal from planetary science perspective. Planetary scientists and many others have proposed for decades that there is a good chance of life on other planets besides this one that I'm currently talking to you on. If we can find evidence of microscopic life on Mars, there may be evidence of other types of life as well, but microscopic in particular. And there are potentially any number of other things that could be discovered by this particular mission. Now, there are people out there who criticize spending money on missions to Mars or any place else for that matter when we have problems here on the Earth. But one thing to keep in mind is that it's entirely possible that there may be solutions to problems on the Earth with the planet, with the atmosphere, with the climate, with COVID that might be found on other planets. So they're worth exploring. So it's got a long journey ahead of it to get from here to Mars. We expect at this point a landing to occur sometime in mid-February of 2021. So we'll keep you posted on this as it makes progress. There was a little bit of a glitch after it cleared the planetary atmosphere. It went into the Earth's shadow, and that shut the systems into safe mode. Mission Control was working this afternoon to restore control. That's actually what the safe mode is designed for. It's to safeguard the systems in case of an issue. In this case, the spacecraft going into the Earth's shadow, away from the sun, away from a solar power source. And so the system was designed to go into this safe mode. It will probably be functioning normally. In fact, it might even be functioning normally now. There just aren't reports out there. So with that, we now turn to the more pressing concern, at least for the east coast of the U.S., of Tropical Storm Isaias. Since last night's podcast, it did strengthen into a tropical storm. It is now a relatively strong tropical storm. Maximum winds are about 60 miles per hour. It's still a relatively large tropical system, and it spent most of the day going past Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and starting to move along the northern coast of the large island of Hispaniola in the Caribbean, which is the home to both the country of Haiti and the country of the Dominican Republic. And as of about 8 o'clock Atlantic Standard Time, which would be 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, daylight time, since we're still in daylight time, the center of the storm was just off the coast of the Dominican Republic. It's actually holding its intensity, which is a little bit unexpected as well, because a decrease in intensity is normally expected when a tropical cyclone interacts with the island of Hispaniola. It's a very mountainous island. And usually tropical systems have a little bit more trouble keeping their organization. And the system is a little less organized this evening than it was early in the day. But if you look at satellite imagery, it's starting to look a lot more like a classical tropical cyclone with feeder bands of thunderstorms on two sides of the storm. In this case, it's really the north and the south side. And as far as what's going to happen to it over the next couple of days, it's going to likely continue on its current northwest course. It may wobble a bit. It may speed up or slow down a little bit. Because of the interaction, there is a chance a little bit more of a reformation of the actual center of the storm, but it's likely going to hold together and start to approach Florida after crashing through the Bahamas tomorrow and tomorrow night. So the most of the track forecasts have a track that goes relatively close to the U.S. East Coast. As always, there are multiple models. There's multiple tracks. And so there are models that take the storm inland fairly close to the coast. There are other models that basically have it hug most of the coast very closely. And then there are still others that are now going for a slightly farther offshore solution, a little more over the Gulf Stream, but that also allows the storm to have a greater intensity. Isaias is supposed to intensify into a hurricane by the time it gets close to the U.S. East Coast. And fortunately, it's continuing to move relatively quickly, and it will move relatively quickly along the U.S. East Coast because it will be driven by steering winds that will keep it moving at a fairly brisk pace. That will help keep the storm from intensifying too much past Category 1 status. And right now, the intensity forecasts mostly go in towards the lower end of the Category 1 range. Regardless, it is a big tropical cyclone. So if you live on the East Coast, you should be starting to think about the possibility of some tropical storm force winds, at least starting early next week, more like late Saturday, Sunday along the Florida coast, and as we go through Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, going farther and farther up the U.S. East Coast, and eventually out to sea in the North Atlantic. So we'll keep watching that as we go through the weekend, but for now, this is the Daily Bolt. Your host, Dr. Jeff Tilley. Have a good night. morning or afternoon, depending when you hear this, and stay safe.